Who are you?
I'm Kalyani, Narlanka. I'm working on the remote assistance team. I'm a developer.
Okay. And we got some other folks here today. So, who are you?
Hi, I'm John Thekkethala. I'm the program manager on remote assistance.
And next?
Saba, the dev manager for remote assistance.
Great.
I'm Dave Heberer. I'm a dev for remote assistance.
Okay, so why are we here today?
So we're here to give you guys an overview of remote assistance and what remote assistance can do for you. We had a version of remote assistance in XP, and we've taken it to a completely new level in Vista. So I think what we'd like to do is sort of share with you guys what we've been able to do in Vista, some of the changes that we brought in, and some of the areas that we've really focused on. We've tried to work on three major features, three major areas really: connectivity, performance, and usability for remote assistance. And I think we've done a pretty good job here. With connectivity, for example, the biggest problem that we've had with remote assistance in XP has been the ability to make the connection when you got two machines that are, from different parts of the world trying to establish a connection. The biggest hurdle has been NAT, so network address translators that sort of come in between. And in Vista, what we're doing is we're using some new technology that's come in, Teredo and IPv6, to actually make that allow that connection to happen. So big improvements in connectivity is probably we're going to reap the benefits of the connectivity improvements as far as users being able to make that connection.
So before you go on, what was the issue before with NATs?
So with a NAT, what you had was NATs came about simply because of the dearth of IPv4 addresses, and when you're behind a NAT, you can get multiple internal addresses. So typically in your home, for example, if you've got a wireless router or just a router in your home, you've got an internal address which goes like 192.168.0.2 or 3 or whatever, and that is not a globally accessible address. So if somebody wants to connect to your machine that's behind a NAT that has got a really private address and it's not globally addressable, that's a problem. So that was the fundamental issue that needed to be solved with NAT traversal. And what happens with IPv6 and Teredo is you actually get a unique globally addressable, a globally accessible address. So we be able to use that to actually make the connection.
Okay. So now we're in Vista. What's the actual end user experience, first of all?
We've got quite a few scenarios. So remote assistance is both a home use scenario as well as a corporate scenario. Fundamentally, remote assistance is meant to allow somebody to help another person. I mean, if you look at it today, computers are getting a lot more ubiquitous. I mean, they're ubiquitous. They're all over the place. And people are, if people really don't want to be tied down maintaining their computers. If I'm a user, I want to use my computer, I don't necessarily need to have all the expertise to maintain it. And just like a car, if I'm a driver of a car, I don't necessarily need to know all the internals and how to maintain a car. So with remote assistance, what you've got is the ability to ask somebody else for help. And from our perspective, we really want to enable that, simply because users are happier users if they're able to get help with their computer problems. It doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. It can just be a fact that they're just trying to collaborate on something. They've got a question on, how do I format this Word document? It's not really a problem. It's just, they just need help with some facet of what they're doing. So from that perspective, we want to enable these scenarios. We want to try and get users to form their own communities, self-help, self-support communities, and sort of deflect calls that would otherwise go to, Dell support or Microsoft support, because people are happier getting help from, somebody they know. I mean, I'd rather get help from a friend or family member rather than an unknown person at Microsoft or Dell. And considering you've got all your important data, financial records, pictures and the like, you're probably more comfortable giving access to your computer to somebody who you really know.
So how do I actually go about giving access to somebody?
So the scenarios are you launch Remote Assistance. In Vista we've actually got a standalone EXE. So it's off of the start menu you've got a.
Do we have one of you guys running Vista that I can take a look at this?
Sure. Okay. Wait, go ahead.
Pop this right off here.
We're all supposed to Vista.
Okay, so here's the start menu.
You go to maintenance, and from maintenance here is Windows Remote Assistance, and boom, here is the main menu for that, which is either you want to invite somebody you trust to help you, or you can offer help to someone else. So that's one way if you want to start it. The other way is we hooked it up into Messenger. So for example, here is John, and let me hold this down a little bit. So I'm talking to John, and I can go to activity here, and then at the bottom we work with any IM team to give them the ability to either request assistance or offer assistance in here. So for example, if I can just request assistance from here, and as simple as that, click, and now John has something on his computer. It's just asking him to say, please help this person.
So I got this little pop-up which says, Saba is inviting you to connect to your computer, and whether I want to accept or decline. So fundamentally what we're trying to do is enable users who are using Messenger, any form of Messenger, to enable remote assistance. So I'm going to go ahead and accept, and at that point we should see something pop up on his screen.
All right. And what I got in here is, we're going to get to that, is a window that's asking me to create a password on the fly. So I can create any password I want to. So I can say RA demo 1, and I come here, tap RA demo 1, and John heard the password, and then as soon as he type it in,
We have to use a password because the communications that go between Messenger aren't necessarily encrypted or anything like that. So the connection string that we're transferring, if we went across plane, you could kind of jump in. You could be the man in the middle that makes an attack by pretending to be John and then coming in. So we have to do this kind of odd thing that in the stream where we say, you should communicate the password in some way other than I am.
So call them on the phone.
You should be talking to them on the phone, or you should be.
Right.
Voice is the best. I think that's the way we recommend it in all the documents. But you can't communicate the password through I am.
So John's typed in the password over here.
Yeah, I've typed in the password, and basically what I've got is he's got a little pop-up on
even after John tapped in the password, I still have the option to say whether I want to connect or not. And so and then I do see his name in here, and that's someone I trust, and I know I just gave him the password. And then that's all there is here. We get the remote assistant menu, and if you go look at John's computer, you're going to see exactly my laptop in here. So now I'm going to move this window, and then you should be able to see that window movement over there.
So I've got Saba's desktop here on my machine, and I'm just going to blow it up so that I get to see his entire desktop. So now I pretty much have a view into his desktop, and at this point I can we have the ability to chat. So I can chat and say, "Hi Saba, what's up?" So the good thing is I can also see what he is seeing, which is I'm able to see the message that he got. So you have the ability to chat at the same time, and typically in a session, if Saba is looking for help on a particular problem, and it would be because he wants me to fix something, I can ask for control of his computer. What it really is, it's the ability to share control, so both of us have access to the mouse and keyboard. And when I have access to the mouse and keyboard, if he's got a problem that he's unable to fix, I can show him how to fix it. The great thing is that he gets to see what I'm doing. And so he's learning how I'm fixing the problem. So it's not just me going in there and fixing it and saying, hey, it's done. So this way he gets to see how it is being fixed. And so it's a learning experience. And it's also sort of a collaborative experience because, if it was a Word document and Saba had a problem just formatting it, I could show him exactly how to format it.
So a quick question I have here is, we've had a couple videos on UAC, and that ties in. Does UAC work across remote assistance?
It absolutely does. One of the things with UAC is that when I have permission to run programs on Saba's machine, if the program requires an elevation, Saba has to provide the elevation. Alternatively, he's also got the option. Actually, we can see it happening right now. When I go and request for control from Saba's machine, so I'm basically requesting for control, and now what you can see is what Saba has on his desktop.
It says I can. So now the first level of collaboration here is that John's seeing what I'm doing. The next level is now he wants to be able to drive what my machine using the mouse and keyboard. And then the third level, which is this checkbox here, which if I go ahead and check it, I also allow him to run. I allow him to show the request for what's it called, AAC? UAC now, right? I know it by Lua.
We've changed the name a few times.
Right. By the UAC to show up on my desktop, not on the secure desktop. What that allow him to do is to be able to also drive the UAC prompts that way too, without me having to come in and type in my password or type in yes or no each time. So if I go ahead and allow him to do that, immediately it's going to say to me, you're going to grant him, you're going to grant John the ability to drive your computer, including seeing this prompt on his screen. And I'm going to say continue, and now John has control of my machine and the two levels. One, able to drive the UI, and then the second one is to be able to execute and respond to UAC actions.
So, the whole UAC thing was actually pretty interesting because it threw another spin into this levels that we have. In the past, we had just two levels, a view only and a share control. Now we've got three levels, view only, share control, and share control with admin privileges. So that's something new that has come up in Vista.
Additionally, we also have the pause introduced in Vista.
Correct.
What is that?
So when you pause, yeah.
So the idea here is that at this point, even though I gave John control, I never lost control because we're sharing these things. So at any point I can always hit the escape button, and that's a panic button to end the control. The second one is what Kalyani was talking about, is the pause button in here. So let's say one of the things that John asked me to do may be enter a password, and I don't want him to know that password. And then as soon as I hit this pause button, you'll see John got a black screen, and meanwhile I can go and do my business here and type in whatever I want to type, or actually stop John from seeing whatever I want to see. And then and when I'm done, I can go back to continue, and then John get back my screen.
If you don't enable the UAC prompting, you get that pause screen when the credential prompt comes up. So if you hadn't allowed John to see UAC prompting, anytime that admin credentials are requested, he would instead see just a pause screen while we don't shadow the secure desktop at all.
Okay, so that brings up another security question, which is if you're sending UAC acceptance back and forth, is this session secured?
Yeah, RDP, all the data that goes over RDP channel is encrypted, so it's never going clear text.
So yeah, we're sort of using the same technology that's used in terminal services. So it's end-to-end encrypted, and security was a big push for us in Vista. And Dave has done a lot of work on the security front, and you probably elaborate on some of the new security features we have in Vista.
We did do a lot of different security works. We had threat modeling because we run in Vista. The part of the Lua push was to make sure that you can perform shadow attacks, right? So Windows with lower level privileges couldn't send window messages to higher level ones, which means that we have to, since we move all the UI around, we run with something called UI access set to true. Very few things do it, and the privilege that gives us makes us vulnerable to people can use us to perform these shadow attacks against admin apps. So we had to run in a lower context. We used to have a service in XP. We don't have the service anymore. We used to have things like you didn't need a password in order to let somebody come in and connect to the machine. Now we require you to have a not that strong of a password, but at least a decent sized password. The 3 different levels that they showed you, with each one, there's a check, and it says, do you want to let this happen? Do you want to let this guy see your computer? Do you want to let this guy control your computer? And do you want to let this guy have UAC prompting? All these things are a level so that you're aware, and you have to make the conscious decision to let this person that's connected to you have these things.
We have also encrypted the ticket, so when you actually start a remote assistance session, what you do is you create a ticket on the novice machine, the RE novice machine, and the ticket gets sent across in one of the ways, email, or you save it to your file and somehow share it with the expert. So in XP, this ticket was actually going clear text. In Vista, this is encrypted. We use AES, the Advanced Encryption System, so it uses a longer key, 128-bit, so makes it enhanced compared to XP.
Okay, let's go ahead.
So there's actually a place where you can. She was talking about the encryption in the control the system. Where's your mouse at, man?
No, John has the mouse.
Oh, give me my mouse back.
All right.
In the didn't I say properties? Yeah.
So that's remote settings.
In remote settings, in the system properties, there's advanced properties here. Allow this computer to be controlled remotely. And this one right here is the one that Kalyani was talking about. Create invitations that only can be used from computers running Windows Vista or later. So if you don't check this box, we do encrypt the ticket just like she says, but to be backward compatible, we have an unencrypted portion of the ticket as well.
Another aspect of security here is that because you're running as the user and not as a service, so you are only running, you can only do whatever that user can do. So what that means is that John cannot come in and help me out and do stuff more that I could do. And so we have to think about lots of the scenario, in particular things like run as. So you can imagine a scenario where I allow somebody to come in, say the admin, and I'm not the admin, and they type run as, and then they type their command, they bring up a command window and they type their password, and now they have a command window running as admin on my machine, and all I have to do is just yank out the wire, and boom, I'm an admin on the box while I'm not supposed to. So we went through many scenarios of this nature, and then we disabled lots of these things, because after all, remote assistance is about collaboration rather than remote administration. If you want to do remote administration, go use 3S, go use, have an account on the machine. This is for someone who doesn't have an account on your machine, who doesn't, just your buddy and wants to help you quickly, and you'll be able to set it up and keep them going at the right level of security that you wish to do. And that's already maxed by whatever I can do anyway on that box.
So I think the power of remote assistance comes from the ability to bring people together, and part of this collaboration requires other apps like Instant Messenger. So even though currently we're only working with Windows Live Messenger, We have an open API that we're actually in discussions with some of the other IAM providers as well. Hopefully they'll integrate, because we want to see this, get pervasive. We want to see people use it. And when you have messaging going, we've got a buddy. It's so easy to ask for remote assistance or offer remote assistance. So we're really trying to encourage other IAM providers to integrate with remote assistance. And Kalyani was actually involved in a lot of the APIs and pulling that together. I'm sure she could give you some more insights.
Yeah, so does this only apply to IAM vendors, or would it apply to other ISVs? Is there a reason to implement remote assistance?
This mainly applies to any IAM vendor. So what we're trying to do is, from within IAM, you should be able to start a peer-to-peer app like remote assistance. So in Vista, we publish a new API called the Rendezvous API. Maybe I can use the whiteboard.
Sure.
So the API mainly consists of two main interfaces. iRendezvous application, iRendezvous session, and there is one to notify the events. This is the events interface. So an app like remote assistance implements iRendezvous application. So what messenger, like the Live Messenger or any other messenger vendor, would provide an implementation of the iRendezvous session interface. So the idea here is that once you have some kind of a pipe, in this case a messenger pipe, to transport the ticket from the novice to the expert, then you can establish a remote assistance connection. So this is to transport the ticket data. So earlier, in the absence of IAM, you would do it via email or a file or even via DCOM. So this is one other way to transport the ticket. So remote assistance publishes the information into the registry, Windows registry, where IAM vendor could actually go and locate the remote assistance app. We have two iRendezvous applications in Vista. One is the request RA app and the offer RA app. So looking at the registry information, the IAM provider actually populates this information in the IAM UI. So this would come up in the activities UI, say, among the list of activities you have request array and offer array. From within IAM, when the user selects the request array activity, say, an invitation gets sent from the RA novice to the RA expert, including the name of the activity. So the expert knows what's this activity and then either accepts the invitation or declines. Once you accept the invitation, the rendezvous application, in this case the RA rendezvous application, starts up on both the RA novice and the RA expert, and the rendezvous session object is actually given to the rendezvous app using the set rendezvous session method. And once you have the session object, RA can use this as a pipe to transport its app-specific data back and forth.
So remote assistance in Vista then implements iRendezvous application?
Correct.
So another remote assistance, if a vendor wanted to build one, could build one and implement the same interface?
Correct.
And then other IAM providers could actually go through an RM provider and look up the same information. So it's
correct. The
pretty
IAM
flexible.
providers typically implement these two interfaces. They provide the events and then the actual session itself. And remote assistance consumes the session and the events. As per the notification, like the data has arrived or the state has changed, it does app-specific things.
We keep saying IAM, but I mean, in reality, any application that just implement iRendezvous session can easily launch RA in whatever method they want to launch it. And they can do the request, they can do the offer, they can do just one of them, and it should work just fine. But obviously our primary users
IM
customers for this API is going to be very likely to be IM providers.
So,
yeah, even before any of the IMs have taken up providing the rendezvous session functionality, we actually had a small IM simulator where we actually implemented the rendezvous session and events to prove that yes, RA can work end to end once you have the session provider in place.
Right. And that was just a simple application that we used to drive testing and simulation of the traffic, regardless of what the IM on top of it will end up doing.
so another way you can request remote assistance is through email, right? That's one of the options
Yes,
through the...
there are...
So
you
is this
have-
email, is Outlook or something implementing any part of this, or what's being launched when you click on that link on the other end?
We use SMAPI. There's a API set, SMAPI API set that it's just to invoke the email client. And so we set up the email, we build the email out of beasters, and then we call the API and say send mail, and it'll invoke your mail client. The tricky thing that we did in Vista was I didn't think we were going to get it in. It is going in, yes? Yes. All right. So most mail clients are 32-bit, and on a 64-bit system, when they write to the Hive saying I'm the default mail client, 64-bit applications aren't aware of the 32-bit mail client. They think that the 64-bit mail client is the one that they should be using. So there's a problem with the side-by-side stuff that we've got going on there. So John, I came up with some idea, and then John drove it to completion. I was surprised that he got somebody to actually buy in on it to make it so that the 64-bit applications, when calling SMAPI, would actually invoke the 32-bit the default mail client that they had set for the system. So that was tricky stuff, but it all works. So
it'll work across any mail client as long
Right.
as it's the default mail client set by the user.
Right. There was particular problems with us when you install Outlook or Firefox that has a mail. What's their mail client?
It's Firefox.
Yeah, Firefox. We being a 64-bit application would not invoke the 32-bit mail client that is installed. So we install Outlook, we set it up, everything's working great, and then we say RA, use it to send the email, and it wouldn't bring up the mail client at all. So John was very unhappy about that, and I tried to explain that it'd be very difficult to make this COM object switcheroo, and he got somebody to do it, and I was quite surprised.
Okay.
So fundamentally, it really boils down to SMAPI capability, and that's a standard interface we're using. So any email client that complies with SMAPI should be compatible with us.
Most do.
Yeah.
Okay, but I saw you asked a couple of questions about what does this want to do that. I can give you overview about the architecture of RA.
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
maybe you can look into that. I know Kalyani put there the usages, so
Yeah, the different modes of RA. So you could separate them out as two, you can call them asynchronous, wherein you don't have an established pipe already between the RA novice and the RA expert, where you bundle the ticket into a file, MSRC incident file, and share it out with the expert, send it via email, the MAPI stuff that Dave was talking about. Or if you're already connected, say via DCOM, you could then transport the ticket over the DCOM channel. The DCOM method is the one which is used by help desk. It's used internally in Microsoft. ITG uses it to help folks within Microsoft. And then we have the IM, where you have a pipe, some kind of transport between the RA novice and expert, where you can transport the ticket and then establish the RA connection.
The difference that we had from XP, we had only APIs that you could call for offer RA through DCOM in XP in 2003. In Vista, all of the functions that you see up there are callable through the command line. So you can however you want to script it to do whatever you want to do, it'll work. I wrote a little gadget, I altered somebody else's gadget so that if you type something in the command or in this little sidebar gadget, you would invoke RA to offer RA to somebody. It wasn't very hard at all.
So it's all these commands right
all
here.
All those are available except for Messenger. The Messenger isn't because it's client specific, but the three other ones, save file, email, and decom, are all command line accessible.
Yeah. So from a just simplistic point of view, there's two main components in RA. There is the RA UI, which sits on top of the RA core library. And Dave worked mainly on the UI, and Kalyani worked mainly on the core library. And they interact via a well-defined API, so you don't have code reaching in here or the other way around. In addition to that is, well, before we get to that, so the core library talks to the Collab API component, which allows us to do all the sharing and the remote connection and RDTP implementation, and that's obviously on top of the network. So you have WinSock and TCP and what have you.
So this is just a standard collaboration API.
Exactly, Sandra. And then, so there's other applications that actually are built on top of this. So, and TCP in here and the rest of the network stack. In addition to that, we have also the RA DCOM server. And then now, and then also the UI works on top of this code, and then that code will allow you to allow the DCOM calls coming through DCOM to also invoke RA. So you can do help desk when help desk can do offer RA from the help desk person to anybody on the corporate, as long as they can get to them through DCOM, they can come through this code and then invoke RA from here. The other side is, of course, is what we talked about right now, which is the rendezvous API, and then that one here also that goes with the core div, and then that allow you to interface with an IM, the IM vendors, right? So IM comes to rendezvous, and then that's how it gets into RA. So another connection that here, this is where the connection to SMAPI. And so this is like the mail client.
And we had to pull that out of the main executable because
right.
We have UI access equal to true, and so when we try to invoke mail clients with nobody can talk back to us. So a lot of mail clients will try to send window messages to the person that invoked them and say, hey, let's collaborate about stuff, and I don't receive any messages from anybody else. So I had to move it to a other process that did not have UI access equal to true.
Correct.
So when you say UI access equal to true, you're talking about the manifest for?
Yeah, in the manifest you declare whether or not you have this property UI access, and that there's a lot of things that look more complicated than they need to be, simply because we have this property so that we can touch other windows. And when we have this, nobody else can talk to us. Nobody can send window messages to us to prevent a shatter attack against admin apps, like I was talking about before.
Right.
So, and the other thing is our comm server setting is interactive. That means it does not inherit whatever RA has. If it's the same as the launching user, it would inherit the same UI access equal to true. By setting it to interactive, we make sure it runs with different access level.
Since those two boxes here are pretty much running with UI access set to true, we had to make sure that they don't make any calls that load other code. For example, we don't load any libraries from here. When we had to load libraries, we had to go to a different process. Or when all the input coming into this two component and coming out is well defined and understood. So nobody can come in and trick this code to execute to launch another code that has that property, because it can drive other people's UI and then trick them into doing things they're not supposed to do. Okay.
And talking a little more about the offer array in the corporate scenario, where typically the RA expert is the one that's initiating the RA session by providing either the IP address or the machine name. And in this case too, in order to reduce the surface, the attack surface, what we did is we actually tightened the permissions on a DCOM server. So the launch, activate, and access permissions of a DCOM server really restricted, and it's like only those that are required for offer array to work.
So what do you mean by RA expert and RA novice? You keep mentioning that.
Yeah, so when we talk about the RA session, basically two people are involved. RA novice is the one that typically needs help. Not a novice, but it's only for this particular RA session, it's a novice trying to get help from the other person that's the RA expert. So in most scenarios, it's the novice that's requesting for help and the expert that gets the request and then in turn responds by offering help. In case of DCOM and the messenger offer RA scenario, it's the expert that actually initiates RA. So in the case of the CorpNet scenario, it types a machine name and gets to the novice's machine because they already are connected, both the machines are connected via CorpNet. And in the offer array case, it's the expert connecting to the novice, the other buddy on
Thanks.
yeah.
So we've had a few feature focus groups that have actually been playing with remote assistance, and one of the things we really wanted to see was how this was all going to work across the globe, right? So we had some very interesting comments by folks who were in a no-name hotel in Australia communicating with somebody in the U.S., also behind some unknown NAT, and they were able to establish a connection, and they were pretty impressed. So we had a lot of great feedback from users saying, hey, we're able to make this connection. And on performance side as well, we've really made some major improvements as far as performance goes. One of the big improvements has been in the tiling algorithm that we have. So when a screen is being changed, for example, you're typing something in Vista, what we will do is only transmit the dirty tiles or the tiles that are changed. So that has substantially improved our bandwidth requirements and sort of reduced the bandwidth requirements, and generally made performance a lot better. So RA is significantly improved connectivity-wise, performance-wise, and all the usability stuff we talked about, with the whole new scenarios, usability, command line parameters, and all that. So I think we're ready to really get some traction in Vista with all these improvements.
So is a tile a fixed size, or it's something that changes based upon what you're
So
doing?
basically, after you establish the RA connection, when you're sharing the screen via RDP, so in XP, all of the screen data was transmitted, the whole chunk, but now it's just the tiles that have changing rather. Just that portion of the screen is transmitted, which means a lot lesser data gets transmitted. That's where you get the performance gains.
Right, but I believe the tile size changes according to the bandwidth. So if you're moving a mouse, you're only moving this little tiles as opposed to moving to the whole window, or it depends what you're changing on the screen. Another point back to security, which I keep thinking about, is also it depends where your machine is or what kind of network you're on. So if you're on a home network versus a public network versus a work network, we set up the different exceptions on RA, so you can have it in the places that you need to have it. So for example, we don't have the exception set for public networks. Because if you just take your machine and you go to Starbucks and your profile switch for the network to a public network, we don't want to, even though we're pretty sure about everything we've done here in terms of security, we don't want people to come in and start attacking us using RA. Unless you explicitly go and then enable the exception, and then you can have assistant, you can start using remote assistant there. Whereas at home, we think this is the secure environment, you're behind the net, you're in a controlled environment, and then you can, and then at that point we give you RA exception in the firewall by default, so you can use it.
So on CorpNet, could I issue a session to help like my mother out on the East Coast, or would our firewall block the RA session from starting?
Okay, so right off the bat, our firewall will block the packets from going back in from your mother's computer.
When you say our firewall, you're really talking about
the corporate
Microsoft corporate firewall,
right.
Not the firewall on the user's PC.
Correct.
So it's the CorpNet firewall you're talking about.
So one of the things that you can do is you can install the ISA client, the ISA client, which allows you to open holes into the firewall so you can use remote assistance. The only issue with that is that it only currently supports IPv4, and and hopefully in the future will support IPv6, and everything will be hunky-dory. But until then, unless the machines unless your mother's machine has IPv4 and it's not behind the NAT, then you cannot connect to it from inside the corporate
firewall.
Yeah, you should be able to connect if she is on a UPnP-enabled NAT, though.
Right.
Because with a UPnP NAT, we have all the right information in the RA invitation, so that if somebody's behind a UPnP NAT and I'm behind a corpnet with a corpnet firewall that prevents IPv6, I can still make the connection if I have the ISA client to allow me to create pinholes in the corpnet firewall.
So anything else about remote assistance you guys want to comment on before we leave you for today?
So one thing in comparison to XP, the additional feature that we added is the offer via IM, which was not present in XP. So this makes it a little more easier for the expert who knows a lot more about the apps and so on to initiate RA as opposed to RA novice asking for help. And feedback from XP, hearing the feedback, we thought, yeah, this is a useful thing.
So I saw a demo of remote assistance which involved actually being able to see what the user had changed on their system or system stability. Is that something that's owned by the same team, or is that a different?
So remote assistance just gives you a window, okay, and over and above that you can do a lot of things. So no, it's not something that we own, but remote assistance really enables that to be done from a remote place. So one of our slogans was, we were hoping that as remote assistance gets more and more popular and people are able to use it across the internet and across NATs, it sort of becomes part of the jargon. So if you have a problem, RA me. So we're hoping that RA becomes part of the vernacular, if you want.
Great. Well, thanks a lot.